Councilman David O. Thank you for tuning in once again to In the Know with David O. We are joined by, well, listen, not just three. We have three segments, but we actually have five outstanding people here today to speak with you. And by the way, we're blessed to have a bunch of reverends in here, a bunch of pastors. You know, they come with the spirit of the Almighty, and so hopefully we shall be blessed with some insights to a positive and better world. Let me tell you that we are joined by Penny McDonald. She is the executive director of Community Forgiveness and Restoration. She is joined by the co-chairs, Pastor Larry Anderson, Pastor Darrell Dave, and then we're going to be talking to Pastor Peter Hwang. Many people know him as Bishop Peter. He is a Korean-American pastor who has been for many years doing the work of racial reconciliation. And we'll be hearing about his work. And then we'll be talking to Christine Riddick. And our topic is proof of innocence, but actually the real topic is when proof of innocence doesn't matter. And that is a deep issue for us to talk about today. But let me first thank, as I always do, our show sponsor, because without our show sponsor, we wouldn't have a show. And that is Weinerman Pain and Wellness. They're located at 100 South Broad Street, Suite 1800. That's on the 18th floor. And what they do is they help people get back to as full and a normal life as possible after a physical injury, work-related, accident, any of those type of things. You know, I used to do this type of work when I was in private law practice, and I've been to their facility, and I can tell you it's worth checking out. If you recall, last week we were talking to Dave Henderson, president of the Global War on Terror Memorial, honoring those who served and died. We also got introduced to Adventure Lost. They're a rock band here in Philadelphia. They were one of the finalists of the 2017 PHL Live Center stage. And then we talked to Richard Simpson, chair of the 82nd Airborne Division Association, Hayjack Moken Philadelphia chapter. And I bring it up because you can hear that show, and actually today's show, and other shows, by going to the website, www.dbam.com. So if you've missed any shows, and I'm really talking about the great guests that we have on, the topics that we talk about, you can check them out there. Let me start by just introducing you to Penny McDonald, Pastor Anderson, and Pastor Dave. They are part of Community Forgiveness and Restoration. It's a faith-based re-entry organization, and they're in fact having a symposium on Saturday, April the 28th. It's going to be from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., and we're going to hear all about it. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, man.
Thank you for having us.
Let me start with Penny, because Penny, you're the executive director, and you actually wear a number of hats. I'm gonna talk about it briefly because you're the woman to talk to. Not only is she a resident of Yeadon, Pennsylvania for over 30 years, she was elected Yeadon Borough Councilwoman from 2008 to 2012, and she's currently serving as the chair of the Yeadon Democratic Party. She also is the executive director of, as I said, Community Forgiveness and Restoration, but she has been president since 2007 of Pride and Passion of Yeadon, a nonprofit community organization, and she's had a number of other roles, but we're going to focus today on Community Forgiveness and Restoration. What is that organization?
Well, it's a faith-based organization that provides resources for returning citizens. We're blessed to be able to go into Graterford for 12 weeks and to work with inmates who are going to be coming home within 2 years. We go in, we meet with them twice a week for 2 hours, and we work with them with teaching them human development, spiritual development. As I said, it's a faith-based organization. We also help them to deal with some of their fears, their traumas, and some of their secrets. They share them with us. And perhaps you don't know, but in prison, they don't share their personal situation. But they share that in our organization. Because of our program, We're able to provide them with counseling, with a life coach, someone to walk with them. And my brothers here will share even more information with you. But when they come home, believe it or not, some of the guys that come home, they don't have any resources, they don't have any wherewithal of what they're going to do, how they're going to get a job, where they're going to live. And that's what our program does. Our programs help them to find housing, find a job, even give them car fare to get back and forth to work. And we're working to do even more for them. We provided clothing for some of them, but they get a life coach, and we also we welcome churches to be a part of our program, so that when they come home, we can assign them to a church that's close to where they live.
Wow, that's pretty different because, for those listening, someone is sentenced to a period of time, their time ends, and now they're out. But out to what? And who is there for them? Pastor Anderson, why is it so important to have churches assigned and to do this work of preparation for their release?
Well, the pain of the recidivism statistics of family members, loved ones, people who are in your community, homes being ripped apart, guys going away, they come back to a community after being locked up and then being locked out of opportunities to better themselves, locked out of housing, locked out of education, locked out of employment, broken relationships with their families. And so you have somebody who comes out. The world has changed drastically,
Yes.
Many times from when they went in. And part of the process is helping be a bridge for them to be able to walk over and try to start again. We believe in forgiveness, and unfortunately, when you go and you pay your debt to society and you do your time, you're still not forgiven. You're still seen as a felon, you're still seen as a con or ex-con, whatever terminology we use to categorize and marginalize those who are trying to come back. And then we shake our heads when we see them go back to prison. But many times they go back because they ran out of options and opportunities. And so part of our goal, part of the reason we exist, is to be that bridge to help them reconnect. The program was started not by us, but by Thomas Robinson, who's on the inside. They started it, they created it. Him and those who are also with him, they came up with it after their hearts broke, seeing guys leave, come out, and turn around and come right back. And they decided, what do we really need when we get out of there to stay out of here? And that's when we came in. We came in to stand beside them, to partner with them, to continue to give them voice and leadership. We are not the brainchild of this. We are the partners, the laborers, those on the outside, helping them come out and get reestablished with life.
Yeah, and for those listening, there could be a number of reactions, but certainly we can agree that when someone leaves prison, we want them to be a productive member of society. We don't want them to fail. We don't want them to go back. And whatever people's feelings are about it, listen, the law is served, and hopefully with support, they will be able to have a fresh new start at life. After all, forgiveness and restoration.
Absolutely.
That's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
Pastor Dave, what is the work that you see being done that has not been done up till now?
Well, one of the things is helping these men to have a different mindset. Like Pastor Anderson said, they've been locked away and locked up. And so it's almost like an animal. When you cage an animal, that animal's not friendly when you let him out of the cage. First of all, because he's used to being confined, used to being controlled, so now you set him free. So before this can happen to these men, there's some things that have to be changed in them. There's some skills that have to be done. Like for instance, human development, spiritual development. Because they've been incarcerated, they don't understand certain things that go on in society anymore. And so as we go in, we help them with such things as anger management, resentment, abandonment issues, separation issues, issues that happen to them when they were children growing up, stigmas that happen to them, trauma that happened in their life that nobody ever helped them to deal with. So what we do is we help to correct some of the things that have gone wrong in their life before they were even incarcerated.
And it may come as a surprise to some people, but the prison isn't preparing them for a successful life, because that's not their job, really, although we would hope they would. And so your organization and others like your organization step in. But what's interesting about your organization, which I've actually not heard before, is you have a network of churches that are available to step in and say, welcome, we understand, and we're going to help. How did that start, Penny?
Well, it started, as Pastor Anderson stated, from this young man inside of Graterford.
And you just handed me
Brochure.
a sheet about him, a pamphlet, and I'm just struck. It's Thomas E. Robinson, Ph.D., Doctor of Ministry.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
He acquired 2 doctor's degrees while he was there. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention the NAACP. His name is Ike. He's the gentleman that the program has been allowed to come under. Thomas Robinson has a whole group of guys who facilitate the program from inside. They vet the young men that come in. And if I go to mention names, I know that I'm going to miss somebody.
Yes.
But those guys up there are phenomenal.
Yeah, it's an impressive story. It's very unfortunate. He's a Desert Storm veteran,
Mm-hmm.
and he was highly intoxicated, committed what he says is a horrible crime. He lost control of his emotions
Mm-hmm.
when he was young, and he has been incarcerated for the past 20 years. But he has certainly changed his life
Mm-hmm.
for the better,
Mm-hmm.
although while incarcerated.
Yes. Yes. He's a preacher, he's a mentor, and he has a lot of skills and abilities so that, and as a matter of fact, he's coming up for commutation now.
Okay.
And so hopefully things will work out for him as well as some of the other guys,
Right.
Janito and Steve. Here I go mentioning names, right?
Yeah, and for those who may not know, commutation is a process whereby the sentence is commuted and the person who is convicted is able to be released,
Mhm.
and that goes through the parole board, the governor's office, things like that.
That's correct.
Pastor Anderson, you're about to say something?
Yeah, one of the things that Dr. Thomas Robinson attributed to his change was his spirituality.
Mm.
And so when he reached out to me, he said, we can do all of this stuff, but if guys are not grounded spiritually, if they don't have a place that can accept them, and that, those who are of the faith, whatever faith that may be, can walk alongside of them, they can end up back here.
Right.
And so when he solicited my help, I'm the director of church help for Southern Baptist, and so
Yes.
I'm in Pennsylvania and South Jersey. So one of the things that I have at my resources is being able to contact churches all over our city. So when a guy is released, he can go to a church that will embrace him, that will accept him, that will help disciple and walk alongside of him and his family. And that's important.
Yes.
Because guys can come home and they come into a church and they might not feel welcome.
Right.
And so my goal is to prepare them and prepare the church for them so that they can come home and have a safe and a blessed transition.
Yeah, I should say that Dr. Anderson, Pastor Anderson, is he's the director of Healthy Churches for the Baptist Resource Network, overseeing 350 churches throughout Pennsylvania and southern New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
So certainly that network and resources is something that you are bringing, which is missing, that needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And let me say that Pastor Anderson is the senior pastor at Living Water Christian Fellowship.
That's Pastor
I'm sorry, I'm looking at Pastor Dade saying Pastor Anderson. I'm sorry, Pastor Dade.
Don't give me another chance.
That was enough, right? Pastor Dade is the senior pastor at Living Water Christian Fellowship. And what has been your what you're most proud about this program, and what is it that you're struggling with about this program?
One of the things that I'm proudest about is seeing the men come home We placed some men in some churches, and we've seen the growth in them since they've been home. They're, for instance, we have one guy who came home. He's an electrician.
Yes.
And the Lord so blessed him that he got a part-time job. The boss saw how good he worked, what a great guy he was, and told me, he said, listen, you need to be in the union. And so the boss automatically worked out some deals for him, so he's now an electrician union.
Wow.
And so
making good money with
making
good benefits.
good money
Yes.
with good benefits.
Yes.
So now what happens is his family's been restored, his children are brought back in the home, and now a family that was broken apart, now it's a cohesive unit.
Yes.
The other thing, one of the things I struggle with, that not enough people step up to the plate, and even society, they want to. This is probably the only country in the world that when men get out of prison, they refer to them as ex-convicts. Not citizens, not just a normal person. You've got a tag on you for the rest of your life. And I think those are some of the things that need to be changed. That if you've paid your debt to society, listen, everybody at some point in their life does something wrong.
Yes.
And so if you've corrected your behavior, and now you've been forgiven, and that means you're going to be forgiven and not have a stigma on you the rest of your life.
Right.
You know, so I think it's important that we even change the dialogue on how we view men who've come home.
Right. Well, let me say for our listeners, if you would like to go into this in a more deeper way, your opportunity is Saturday, April the 28th, at the Christian Stronghold, 4701 Lancaster Avenue. And Penny, what is this program going to be about?
It's going to be about education. People are going to learn how they can help our citizens who are coming home. It's going to be information. We're going to have a state senator there. We're going to have some state reps there. We're going to have a panel of legislators as well as some returning citizens who will be able to answer some questions. And we have many people here in Philadelphia who have been touched by someone who's been incarcerated. They'll be able to come out and get some help, get an understanding of what's going on, or even how they can get some help with their present situation. I just want to say that it starts at 10, but registration starts at 9.
It's a free event. And listen, be among the first 300, so you make sure you get your lunchbox. Don't be number 301.
You won't get to eat.
Oh my goodness, no. And listen, it's going to be hosted by Solomon Jones.
From Praise.
Yes, Praise 107.9. Praise 107.9. Great host, wonderful person, doing a lot of good things, and he will be there, along with so many important other people that need to be involved in this conversation. And in many parts of our city where we live, there is someone who is coming back to Philadelphia, and we need to make sure, for all our sakes, that they do well.
Yes.
Well, listen, I really appreciate the spirituality portion of it. I'm getting tongue-tied here. Because, like so many people, I believe violence starts in the heart. And you've got to change the heart in order to solve this problem.
Amen.
Yeah, when you bring people back and you try to give them all the material things, but you haven't changed their heart, that likelihood of success is really quite diminished. And, this organization consists of many good-hearted people doing their best to make sure that we can reduce crime, violence, and see that people throughout our city are living as good and as positive a life as possible. And in today's world, this is so important that we deal with this issue. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
All right, listen again, Saturday, April the 28th. Get there at 9 o'clock to register and get your lunchbox. Hey, Christian Stronghold, 4701 Lancaster Avenue. Well, listen, stay tuned. After this commercial break, we're going to be talking to an amazing person, Bishop Peter Hwang, and the work that he's done on racial reconciliation. All right, and we are back. Listen, we were, in case you missed it, we were talking to Penny McDonald, Executive Director of Community Forgiveness and Restoration, along with her co-chairs, that is Pastor Larry Anderson and Pastor Darrell Dade. talking about the work that they do and the event that they're having on Saturday, April the 28th, 4701 Lancaster Avenue. Check that out. And now I'm speaking to Bishop Peter Hwang. He is a Korean American pastor. He's the 32nd president of the Council of Korean Southern Baptist Churches in America, and he's a local pastor in Upper Darby. Welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. We've been friends for a long time, so I could tell you that Pastor Hwang, Bishop Hwang, has done a lot of work in our local community, but one in particular that he is well known for among many of our African American clergy members is his work in taking African American pastors to Korea.
Yes.
And why do you do that, Pastor? Would you tell our listeners?
I came to States in 1975 as a student to study the theology.
Yes.
And after I finished my MD, I planted one Southern Baptist Korean church in Philadelphia area.
Yes.
And then soon after, right after my church planted, all the Korean churches surrounding Philadelphia County, they decided to have a council of Korean churches in Greater Philadelphia.
Yes.
And I've been jumped in as a new pastor, and I've been served about 10 years in a lot of different functions. After 10 years of serving, we have been past community issues between the Korean American, typically with the African American.
Racial tensions,
That's right.
problems,
Yeah.
other types of things. yeah.
Many Koreans they immigrate here,
Mhm.
and by by chance they've been situated largely, mainly in black neighbors.
Yes.
And
In
they have-
African American neighborhoods.
That's right.
Yes.
And after they have business in that communities, because of their language barrier and their cultural barrier, made a lot of misunderstanding.
Yeah, one of them that comes up a lot, I remember, is that in Korea, typically the merchant will put the money on the counter so that you can see it. But in America, usually the money is handed
That's right.
to the hand of the customer.
That's correct. And not only that, we have we've been grown from the so-called shame culture.
What is that? Shame culture.
That is the woman supposed to not exposed to others. And,
Not true anymore, but,
Oh,
but certainly. Listen, don't go to Korea. You'll get some serious women fight back. But certainly in the 80s, in the 70s,
80s.
yeah, it was more customary that women would not look directly into the eyes of a man.
Still that is going on.
I don't
Oh,
know.
wow. Senior.
I haven't experienced. I got to tell you, but yes, I So that created a lot of misunderstanding.
Especially those in the store situation that husband is working inside of the stores,
Yes.
but usually the wife they are selling the cashiers,
Yes, I think
and
that's
then
cashier.
they have to give the changes.
Mm.
If they give them changes to the palm of any customer, that means insult themselves, and also that's like a gesture to others.
Yes.
No,
Yeah, and let me just point out for our listeners that I remember I went to Korea for the first time ever. I was born in Philadelphia. First time ever I went in, I think it was 1986. And just how rapidly the country of Korea has changed just so dramatically.
Yes.
Not just the buildings, but the customs, the culture, and the people. But in the 1970s, after a change in the immigration law, many Koreans immigrated to the United States for opportunity, but they didn't have any money when they came over.
That's right.
And so they could not, if they could not find a job or get a job, they could only, as they did in Korea, start a little store, do a little business. And in areas that were wealthy, they could not afford to do that, so they ended up in poor neighborhoods,
That's
whether
right.
poor Hispanic neighborhoods, poor white neighborhoods, or poor African American neighborhoods, and here in Philadelphia, they set up in poor African American neighborhoods many times where they did not understand the history of the people they were serving.
That's right.
They also didn't understand the civil rights movement. They didn't understand the sacrifice of African Americans in the military, trying to vote, the history of slavery. And then the African American community, they didn't understand the history of occupation in Korea, World War II. And so two groups of people not understanding each other, but coexisting in a tough area.
That's correct. And because of those, that unknown things to
Mhm.
each
Yes.
communities, and always tension came up,
Yes.
and it ended up to the really life
Murders,
Yeah.
robberies, people going to prison, all kind of things. And so, how did you end up with other clergy organizing this kind of racial reconciliation ministry?
So back in 1990, the council, they appointed me.
Council of Korean Churches.
Yeah, Council of Korean Churches, they assigned to me that to have to building up the relationship between the Korean churches and other churches, mainline churches, and as well as African American churches.
Interesting.
And I try to, what's the best way to bring these two communities to find a way to get together. And only one thing we thought at the time is let's just let them have some first-hand information or the knowledge or the experience about the Korean and Korea.
Because Koreans were in America, and so maybe take the African American clergy to Korea.
That's right.
Now that's pretty expensive, isn't it?
Well, that's right. So back in 1990, the first group was sent from this area in 1991.
Yes.
And at the time, all the Korean churches, they raised the money to sponsor one pastor for each church.
How many churches?
I believe we about 35 churches were involved.
So 35 pastors,
So about 15.
about 15 pastors, sponsored by about 35 churches. So they flew to Korea, where they had a program of going to other churches, meeting people, and learning about the culture and the history.
The historical side and then also the industrial side. So they saw how the Korean looks like, and also how they are diligently working for their life, and then also the Korean church and culture. And then in those days, the first group, among them, the Reverend Moore,
Yes.
he was serving as a clergy, president of a black clergy for a long time
Yes.
ago.
Yes.
And another pastor, he deceased, but the Reverend Thomas Ritter.
Thomas Ritter, sure.
Yeah, they are all water group.
Yes.
And after they came back, they awakened who the true Korean looks like. And then from there, we tried to building up the united service between the Korean churches and the African American churches. So we even conducted several times. And after that, probably every other years, I try to make a group from locally or nationwide, bring the African American clergy and then educator or the community leaders. And one time we had a bunch of the police people.
Oh, you brought some of our law enforcement to Korea.
Well, they are the one in the front line. To
Yes,
the people.
yes. So yes, our police, yes, they are on the front line of a lot of issues and problems in our communities and neighborhoods.
From this the program, I found out that there are so many common denominators between the Korean and the African American. There are
Yes.
so many similar things.
It is interesting, isn't it? And it just goes to say that if people knew each other better,
Yeah.
they would find so many things in common.
That's right.
Yeah.
So from those days, then we can build up the friendship with the friendship, we can build up the trust relationship.
Yes.
So in nowadays in the Philadelphia, I think among the 50 states, this is the most beautiful city to have the real beautiful relationship between the Korean and the African American communities.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciated to the African American leaders and the communities in this country simply because without their sacrifice, I think there is no successful Asian American immigrant can be settled down in America.
Very true, very true. This, if it was not for the civil rights movement
That's
and
right.
the sacrifice of many people, but focused particularly on African Americans and legal discrimination, certainly the immigrants who come to the United States today would be faced with quite a different situation.
Yeah, and still, so as a minority, the African American, they are the largest group of the minority in this society, as well as the Latino. But the Asian, especially Korean American, with the close attachment with the African American and the Latino American, as united all of the minority can be a majority of the country sooner or later, I believe.
Certainly, all people getting together, and one of the things I really appreciate about what you do, Bishop Hwang, is you reach the commonality of what we aspire to be. Certainly, everyone in the church aspires to the same common values of justice, kindness, and sacrifice, and other things, and we have to see it in each other.
You know, you have your own personal the history of your family about this, that racial tension.
Yes.
Back in 1958, I remember.
Yeah, I'll do
Your
it quick.
uncle.
I'll do it quickly because we're running out of
Yeah.
time. But let me say what Bishop Hwang is talking about is my cousin was murdered in 1958 by a group of 11 African American
Yes.
youth, and the city was looking at the death penalty, but his parents and my father and mother sent a letter asking for the most lenient treatment possible under the law, and actually raised money for their vocational rehabilitation, education, spiritual guidance when they were released from prison. And I really, as a child, saw that, and eventually, as I've gotten older and older and older, I have begun to be more and more affected by the idea of forgiveness and letting everyone have the best possible opportunity, and certainly what is God's will. And certainly I have been forgiven and given many opportunities, and I begrudge no one that. But certainly it is a wonderful calling, and the work that you have done is so appreciated. There are so many pastors that I run into as a city councilman, and there are some very impressive pastors, and then to my surprise, years later they'll say, "Oh, I went to Korea with Bishop Hwang." I said, "Oh yeah, I know Bishop Hwang." So you have many people who have been to Korea through you, and certainly we can celebrate that. Our time is up. I'm just surprised sometimes how quickly this show goes, but let me tell everyone, stay tuned, because we'll be back after this commercial break talking to Christine Riddick about her son Eric and the issue of proof of innocence. We are back. Thank you for tuning in. We were talking in our first segment with Penny McDonald and pastors Larry Anderson and Darrell Dade of Community Forgiveness and Restoration. And then we were talking to Bishop Peter Hwang, a name that is familiar to so many of our clergy leaders in the African American community, for his ministry of racial reconciliation, particularly between Korean Americans and the African American community. But now we're going to talk to Christine Riddick. She is a mother. Let me start with that. She's also been judge of elections here in Philadelphia for the past 20 years, and she's a advisory council member at the Francis Myers Recreation Center. and a member of the 12th Police District Advisory Board. Her late husband was a Philadelphia police officer. But the reason she is joining us today is talking about proof of innocence. Her son Eric is incarcerated right now. He spent 26 years in prison. But let me read you this. This is from an opinion, a concurring statement by a Superior Court judge, and this is what it says. No system of criminal justice is perfect. However, a system of criminal justice that prevents the correction of obvious errors is easily improved, if only the legislature could see fit to do it. He is talking about the Post-Conviction Relief Act. And that is an act when evidence is not provided to the court through what I would say, negligence of the attorney. But the Post-Conviction Relief Act here in Pennsylvania is a very tough act, and in some cases, and certainly if it is my case or your case, a matter of grave importance to us. And so, what this judge writes is this. I write separately only to express my utmost displeasure with the Post-Conviction Relief Act's failure to facilitate justice in this case, where it is clear to all that it is likely that an innocent man sits behind bars for no better reason than a poorly conceived statute. What does that mean? Well, what the judge is saying is this is the right decision to deny the appeal under this law, but this law is poorly written, and therefore, under this law, a person who's likely innocent remains behind bars. Who we're talking about is Eric Riddick, the son of Christine Riddick. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Councilman O, and good afternoon to the radio listeners. I really appreciate Councilman O giving me this opportunity to continue to bring awareness to not just my son's case, but to all those behind the walls who feel they have no voice, that there's no one outside the walls that is trying to make sure, one, those who are wrongfully convicted, that their information is put out there to those who can correct the injustice, but also for those who are looking for redemption and second chances.
Yeah, let me tell everybody, this is how I met Christine Riddick. She came to my office. She was going to different council offices in City Hall, and she's been to different legislative elected officials. Apparently, I did not know that. I wasn't there when she stopped by. I caught her on my way in. I was somewhere else, and so we didn't get a chance to talk, but we set a time to meet. But what she did is she left a booklet behind. It is a booklet of evidence that her son and her daughter-in-law and that she put together. And so basically, she set an appointment, said, please read this before we meet. And so the book sat on my desk for a while, and then before meeting, I picked it up, and the first thing I did was read a concurring opinion, and it is the opinion that I just read. Wow, Justice Fitzgerald joins in this concurring statement. I mean, the thing about it is that I have never seen a judge of a court in an appeal write and say that likely an innocent man is behind bars because of a failure of a statute. Now that is a pretty strong statement. Mm-hmm. And so I turned the page and I began to read about the case, and a couple things jump out at me. And I'm a former prosecutor. I've done a criminal defense as well, and so this is one of those very rare cases where not only does someone say, I'm innocent, but hands you the proof of it, the evidence of it. And so let me start with this. There was a person who was unfortunately murdered and shot, and then a eyewitness says Eric Riddick did it. He was on a balcony and he fired a weapon downwards and shot this man. The scientific evidence, the forensic evidence is that the bullets were fired horizontally or from a position
Upward.
upward, down to up, not up to down,
Right.
down to up,
And not downward.
not downward, upward and straight. So what happened? There were two different types of bullets, a 32 and a 22. And so it would indicate from the angles and everything else that two separate weapons were fired straight and from a downward to upward position, and that would contradict scientifically that someone standing above the victim would have
Exactly.
fired downward. Next, the defendant, Eric Riddick, had alibi witnesses, 3 of them who were in court yet never called to testify. And it appears, although I can't say for sure, but it appears that the reason they weren't called is because the defense attorney never provided notice of alibi witness. And for those who don't know this, you just can't bring up an alibi witness who says, I was with this person, you weren't there, unless you provide notice to the prosecution. And so 3 alibi witnesses were in court throughout the trial, ready to testify, never called. And then the eyewitness recanted and said, I did not tell the truth.
Actually provided affidavits.
Affidavits, yes. And so all this is brought into court on a post-conviction relief appeal. And under the law, this does not get him a new trial, a new opportunity, or does not get him out of jail.
And the unfortunate thing is that the court's reasoning was because of a technical error. The technical error being a particular paper was not filed in time, which is not true because my son's case continued based on what they say wasn't filed in time. So a technicality, my conclusion is a technicality is worth more than a human life, because a technicality can be changed. Just like a statute was written, it can be modified, it can be changed if it's shown to be cumbersome and burdensome to the very people that it's supposed to protect.
Yeah, let me say that years ago, many years ago, when I just got out of the military, after having served in the district attorney's office, I was approached by some people from New York who brought a case to me about a father who was doing life imprisonment, convicted of murdering his daughter. And they said he's innocent. And I said, well, yeah, everybody says they're innocent. I don't know, but they presented me with some documents because I asked for it, and I said, listen, I will look at them. And they were not brief and well organized like the booklet you gave me. So I poured through it, and what struck me was that there was a fire that occurred in the cabin in the Poconos, and the person who was found guilty and had passed his appeals and lost his appeals and everything, and so basically he was the father of a young lady, and he said that there was an electrical fire in the ceiling, and that's what happened. And then what I found was that the prosecution brought witnesses who said that he mixed 76 gallons of home heating fuel with gasoline and poured it throughout the cabin and then lit it on fire from the front door. And there was evidence that there was an electrical fire. But at trial, instead of saying there was an electrical fire, the attorney said, yes, there was 76 gallons of fuel. It was an arson, but it was a daughter who was committing suicide. And so that is a ridiculous a thing for the jury.
Yes.
Did he do it, or did the daughter, frail young woman, do all this? She had no car, he had no car. And so that issue, he was found guilty. And so once the evidence was presented, once it was found by me that there was evidence, and I got even more evidence that it was an electrical fire. And listen, it's very simple, folks. despite all the expert testimony, what it comes down to this. If a fire is set with fuel on a carpet and it burns from the ground up, the bottom of the table is burned more than the top. The bottom of the mattress is burned, not the top. But what happens when the top of the mattress is burned? What happens when the top of the mattress is burned but not the bottom? What happens when the top of the desk is burned but not the bottom? Well, the fire came from the top. And there's so much simple evidence that shows that it's an electrical fire. But despite all this, we went all the way up, and through the PCRA, the Post-Conviction Relief Act hearing, the standard is that the attorney, for any reason really that he chooses, can decide to call witnesses, not call witnesses, present evidence or not. And so what is new evidence? It's not what's new evidence that you and I think of it, it's evidence that was not available at the time. So if the evidence was available to the attorney, even though the attorney didn't present it or didn't find it, didn't look for it, it's not new evidence. That's a pretty harsh standard. And so when I and I'm happy to say that eventually through a federal court case, his appeal was successful and he was released from prison. But after many years. And in this case, this is the second time that I have seen evidence that shows that the person should not have been convicted in the first place, and yet this evidence is not making a difference.
And that's the harsh reality. I mean, that happens unfortunately when, my conclusion, when egos and appearance